Yo, welcome back legends. Today it's engine mounts and transmission mount time. Yep, that's right. I'm going to show you how to swap out the engine mounts and the transmission mount on a BA or a BF Falcon. Here are the tools you're going to need and let's go. Alright, let's get on with this. So have a jack and some jack stands ready, as well as a block of wood for supporting your oil pan. Have a ratchet gun ready, a rubber mallet, some Loctite, the blue stuff. Have a ratchet and some extensions. This swivel extension will really come in handy, so get one of those. Have a 7mm, a 13mm long and short, a 15mm and an 18mm long and short sockets. Have a 13mm spanner and a 15mm spanner. Have a pry bar ready. Have a torque wrench to tighten things down. Have a work light to see in some dark spots, and last but not least, get yourself some cut resistant work gloves so that you don't cut up your hands. Link below if you want a pair of these. So that's all the tools out of the way. Now onto the DIY video. Do me a favor, before I get started here, hit the like and the subscribe button, really helps me out. So we're going to start under the bonnet here. So you've got two engine mounts. You've got one on this side, there's the top bolt just there, and then corresponding to this side you've got another one here. Now what happens is your engine rocks this way, so that way. So this is the side that constantly gets torn because it's being lifted away from the chassis. So we're going to start by replacing that one, and to do that we're going to have to remove a few things. So let's do that first. This air pipe is going to be in your way, so remove it. You've got two 7mm bolts here. Now's a good time to check your pipe, make sure there aren't any cracks. Cool, so I can see the engine mount now. Can you see that bolt right there? That is your top bolt on your passenger side engine mount. So we're going to need to undo that. Now, to reach down there, what you're going to need is an 18mm socket. You're going to need one of these flexi joints, some extensions, and a pry bar to unloosen everything. So take your 18 and put the flexi joint on the end, then put your extension on the end and another extension, just as many as you need, and then at the end of that put your pry bar onto it. And with that all set up, you should be able to put this socket onto the end of that nut, get your pry bar onto the end of the extensions, and there it goes. She'll be on tight. Alrighty, so with that nut loose, in a minute we'll be jacking up the car and lifting up the engine with a jack, and because that nut is off, we'll be able to lift the engine away from the engine mount. And really that's your next step. Jack up this car and use a jack to lift up the engine. Now when you lift up the engine, use the sump and place a large block of wood underneath the sump so that it distributes the weight evenly. And as you lift, you should be able to notice the engine lifting away from the engine mount. So keep lifting the engine a fair bit. Just watch your hose here. Make sure that you don't put too much tension on your top radiator hose. If you find that you can't lift it enough, then you might just have to undo this hose here and lift the engine some more. But I think I got it at a good point. So heading underneath the car, you're going to find a bolt just there. It's behind your oil cooler. Can you see this bolt here? So that's the bolt we're going to hold with this 13mm spanner. So slide it underneath your CV boot over here, and it'll come through up through here, and just hold on to the bolt like that. So that's sitting through there like that. And on the other side, you're going to find a nut. So I'm going to put a 15mm socket on that while I hold this spanner in place on the other side. So I've got the nut off, and now on this side I can slide this 13mm bolt out. Now if this is being hung up, can you see how it's hung up a little bit over here on this cooler? What I can do is raise the jack just a little bit more. There we go, so that now slides out. So there's a long bolt. Okay, so there's the bottom bit that's come off, but as you can probably see, we've still got the top bit captured in the engine mount, or the engine mount bracket itself. So we're going to just need to tap that out, this bit here. So this bit's captured. Okay, there we go. So that's come out as well now. Don't forget to grab your 18mm nut. You're going to need it in a minute. So that's that one there. Okay, so there is the empty engine perch. And to put the mount back in, do you see that little hole just over there? So on the new mount, that needs to line up with that little nipple just there. But before we put this on, we've got to transfer it to this bottom bracket over here. So let's do that next. Now usually this mount is in one piece, but as you can see, quite a while ago, this thing separated, and this is usually actually filled with hydraulic fluid, and that's all gone now. So yeah, basically this is toast. We need to remove it from this bottom bracket because we've got to put this bottom bracket back on the car. So to undo that, take an 18mm and just remove this. We keep the bracket, we throw the rest of this away. Just giving this a little bit of a clean to give it the best chance of seating properly. There we go, that's better. Take this side and line up that little nib there with that hole, like so. The nut goes back on. Make sure it's super tight. So now the trick will be to feed this back in. Again, watch your engine, make sure it's high enough, and then go ahead and feed this in. All right, let's go and do that. So the best way I found to mount this is feed it through on this side of the control arm and bring it up here. And then once you're up here, just rotate it and get the bracket over the perch there, just like so, and just line everything up. Alrighty, so that's lined up, but I don't know if you can tell, it's not quite sitting in there perfectly because up here the shaft for the top bolt is just a little bit too long. So we're going to need to lift this engine up just a little bit more, but as I do, I'm going to watch my coolant hose. If it's getting too tight, I'm actually going to undo this hose. So just bear that in mind. If you're getting a little bit too tight up near the coolant hose, stop and take your coolant hose off. You're going to lose a bit of coolant, but that's better than cracking your radiator. Oh, so close. Okay, beautiful. So that's sitting in place. You take your long bolt and pass it through. And now, with everything aligned, you should be able to lower this jack down really slowly. So as that jack is going down really slowly, I'm keeping an eye on this bolt up here, and yep, it's coming through, so that's good. So now that I know that that engine mount is sitting right, I'm going to take my 18mm bolt, I'm going to reach up through here and just reattach it. And I'm just reattaching it loosely. I'll put the 15mm bolt back in the bottom. And while holding the other side with a 13mm spanner, I will torque this bolt down and tighten this bolt down to 100 Newton meters. Okay, so that side is pretty much done. The only thing I didn't do is tighten up this bolt down here. So I've left that a little bit loose, and the reason I did that is because I'm about to do the other side, and when I do, I want this side to be a little bit loose so that the engine has a little bit of rock, a little bit of movement, so that I'm not putting a lot of strain on this engine mount and effectively destroying this engine mount. If this is torqued down tight, obviously when the engine flexes like that, all the pressure will be on this engine mount. So I want it loose just for a little bit to take the pressure off it while I do this side. Speaking of which, okay, same kind of deal on this side. Down here we have an 18mm, so I'm just going to reach in there and undo that. So now that we've got that undone, put a 15mm spanner on the opposite end to hold the nut. So I've just got a 15mm spanner sitting on the opposite side of that bolt there. I'm going to undo this LPG pipe, so if yours is in the way, take it out as well. And I'm just going to use a ratchet to get in here and undo this bolt. There we go, so that nut fell on the ground and this bolt now comes out. So once again, we're going to need to lift the engine up. So this time around, we're lifting this side of the engine up all the way. And we've got the engine anchored on the other side with the new engine mount. So everything should rock up this way. Okay, so I've tried the same thing on this side where I'm jacking up the sump to lift the engine, but I'm running into a problem. And that is this water pump hose is getting stretched a little bit too tight for my liking. So essentially I'm worried that that hose is getting stretched too thin and potentially damaging the radiator. So I'm going to change tack here. This is what I'm going to decide to do. If you want to, by all means, you can drain your coolant, and basically once you've got this hose disconnected and separated from the radiator, you will be able to lift this engine up enough to remove the engine mount. But I'm not going to do that because I don't really want to bleed the cooling system. So I'm going to show you a different way to tackle this, and you're going to need to remove 4 bolts. So basically, once we've got the bottom bolt removed and we've got this top bolt removed as well, over here, am I pointing to the right thing? Over here. So once the top bolt and the bottom bolt are removed from the mount, I'm actually going to remove this mount bracket too, and this mount bracket bolts to the block. So to bolt this mount bracket to the block are 4 13mm bolts. So I'm going to remove those using a 13mm spanner and a 13mm socket. So let me show you how to do that now, in case you don't want to have to drain your coolant as well and bleed your coolant. Like I said, by all means, drain your coolant and remove that water pump hose, and then you'll be able to lift your engine up high enough. But if you don't want to do that like I don't today, you can do it this way too. So let me show you. So on the bottom here, you're going to find 2 bolts. There's your first attached to this tether, and the second one is in there. So both of these are 13mm bolts, and on the top you're going to find another one just there, and the last one is in there. So that's 1, 2, 3, and the last one's down the bottom there. Now these go into the block, so eventually when you put them back in, you're going to need a little bit of Loctite, so the blue stuff, not the permanent red stuff, to torque those down and make sure that they stay in place and they don't come loose. So have some Loctite ready, but let's go. Okay, first I've decided to undo the bottom bolts here. But you can do these in any order you like. You can start at the top if you like, but yeah, I'm basically going to undo this one, then this one, then I'm going to go head up and do the other 2. I'm going to start with this tight one here, and what you're going to need, the space is a little tight in there, so what you're going to need is a 13mm spanner. You may not fit a socket in there like I won't, so that goes on there like that. Now this is torqued down and there is thread locker on it, so you might find that you can't just undo it with the spanner itself. What I tend to do in situations like this is find a large spanner or a large shifter in my case and grab the end of it like this, attach it to the end, and this gives you a little bit more leverage. So now you can pull on it and the bolt comes undone quite easily. There we go, and when you got it loose enough you can drop your extension. Okay, so that's the first one. So for this one I'm going to use a 13mm socket on a pry bar extension. So I'm just going to get it started. Like that. Switching to a ratchet. Alright, so when you redo this bolt, don't forget that this tether is on it. So what I'm actually going to do is leave the bolt inside the tether. So with those two bottom bolts undone, I'm switching to the top here. I'm going to remove these two bolts up here. So 1, 2. So you might have to lift the engine up a little bit to get to this last bolt. And lucky last. Okay, so there's the fourth bolt, and now you'll find that this bracket just lifts straight out. Look at that, slides straight out. If you undo 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. Alright, so I'll set this aside. So look at this, just comes out all as one piece. This has seen better days. For some reason, this metallic part down the bottom here has completely collapsed. Time for the new engine mount. Okay, it's the same deal on this side. We've got a nut to undo. So this is an 18mm. We're keeping the bracket. And just take a look at this. Wow. Not really sure what happened here, but wow. I'm fairly certain that's not supposed to be that way. Quick clean to make sure everything seats properly. So just mount this back on here, and you want that hole just there to match up with this little locator here. So just like that, line this back down, and you want this super tight. So now it's time to put this back in the car. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is mount this back on its perch like that. I'm even going to take the long bolt and feed it through. You're going to want to make sure that that little divot there sits outwards. Just going to raise up the engine a little bit. Then I'm going to take my top locator and basically fandangle this back into place. Okay, there we go. Now take your bolts and put a little bit of thread locker on it, not too much. We're going to start feeding them in. Now that I've got these two front bolts wound down, I'm going to do this one in here.
So a 13mm spanner goes on this fairly easily, but you're just going to have to fandangle that bolt past this engine mount over here. It will go in, but yeah, you're just going to have to fight this engine mount a little bit to get this bolt in. Once you're in, grab your 13mm spanner and wind this down. Now, something to keep in mind, you're not going to be able to torque this one down, but torque the other three down, and with this one, just make it as tight as you can possibly make it after you torque the other three down. So I'm just going to bottom this out for now. There we go. So I'm fairly certain that that's bottomed down, just there. Now that I know that that's in place, I'm going to go back up top and start bottoming down these other bolts and torquing them down. Back up top, once I know that these two bolts are bottomed out, so that one is, and that one is, I'm going to take a little bit of thread locker and feed this top bolt back in as well. And now, because the other three bolts are already in, fairly easy to screw this in because the other three bolts are aligning this mounting bracket, and sure enough, that's screwing in nice and easy. So now that that's in, I'm going to lift the engine again, and I'm doing this to clear this little bolt over here so that I can get my ratchet past it onto this bolt to be able to screw it down. There we go, and that's on there now. And torque this down to 50 Newton meters. Do all three. So once all those are torqued down to 50, we're going to do the bottom one as well in a minute, but for now, lower the engine onto this bolt. There we go. Now I can take my 18 and put it on the top of this engine mount and just wind this down. Okay, now that's nice and snug. I'm going to take my torque wrench and wind this up to 100 Newton meters. 100. So now, if you've got a gassy like me, take your hose and plug it back in. So on the top here, we're pretty much done. Just going to need to go underneath and do up a couple more bolts. Finally, we're going to do up this final bolt here, the one that's in a tricky spot. So just bottom it down. Again, you're not going to get a torque wrench in there, but do you remember how you had to use this to tighten it up? So just give this one turn. There we go. That's nice and tight now. We've got our engine mount mounted to our engine mount bracket, the bracket mounted to the block. We just got to do up this final bolt. So this also needs to be 100 Newton meters. So looking through here, there is your bolt right there, and the nut will need to go onto there. So there is a hole, about a hand-sized hole, that you can put your nut through. So take your 15 and just feed it through here and put it onto the bolt and get it started. Okay, so once you've got it started, take a 15 and hold it in place. And with that 15mm spanner in place, holding the nut in position, you can come back around to this side and do up your nut. Again, it needs to be 100 Newton meters, 100. Spanner out, check everything, make sure you haven't missed anything or left anything in, like a bolt or a spanner or a socket. Looks good. And now that all of that is buttoned up, just head back to the passenger side here and torque down this final passenger side top mount bolt. And again, with this one, 100 Newton meters should do it. 100. And with that done up, don't forget your torch. Just reattach your air intake.
Okay, you're done under there. The two engine mounts have been replaced, but don't celebrate just yet. We've got one more to go, and that one is underneath there. That's right, there's one more that supports the transmission. Don't worry, this one's a lot easier. Sort of. Your transmission mount is sitting right about there in the middle of the car. So jack up your car and support both sides with jack stands on the chassis rails. I've also got a spare jack stand in the front of the car, just in case this thing decides to tilt forward because it's front heavy due to the engine. So if it does, it'll land on that jack stand. But anyway, you'll be working underneath here with this cross member. This is what supports your transmission, and just above it, up in here, is going to be the transmission mount. So we're going to need to remove this cross member. Now to do that, you're going to have 2 bolts here, you're going to have 4 in the middle, and you're going to have another 2 on this side over here. You're dealing with 13mm bolts. Now before you can undo this, obviously the transmission is resting on it, so see this little weight balance thingy before your draft shaft over here? We're going to take a jack and we're going to jack this up so that it supports the transmission while we remove this cross member. Like that, you can stop. So now that that's being held up there, we're going to undo all of these bolts. So there's 4 in the middle and 2 on each side. They're all 13, so get them undone. Okay, with everything loose, just going to undo this last bolt, which I've got loose in here to hold everything. And once that's out, this will drop down. With the cross member out of the way, here is your transmission mount. Now, as you can see, mine's pretty loose and it's well past its use by date. On both sides of this transmission mount, up here, you will find a bolt. Again, I believe this is a 13, so undo both of those. 13mm spanner. There we go, 13mm bolt. Get the other side as well, it's exactly the same. Okay, once you got that other side out, there is your old engine mount. So then take your new one and feed it on exactly the same way. Nuts back on. So with both bolts in and tightened up, it's time to put the cradle back on. So after a quick clean, just going to slide this sucker back on. Should line up fairly easily. Just going to put 1 bolt in to hold the whole thing. There we go. Okay, do these up to 45 Newton meters. You can now remove your jack to give yourself more room. And finally, you can do up the last 4 nuts. Make these 45 Newton meters as well. Okay, so you're pretty much done. So there you go, legends. That's how you replace your engine mounts and your transmission mount as well. Difficult? No, not really. Just yeah, bear in mind you're going to get really dirty. I don't know if you can tell, but I am absolutely filthy, and that's going to happen because you're climbing underneath the car. And yeah, if your car has 350,000 Ks on it like mine does, you got a few leaks, so those leaks are going to get all over you, your hands and everything else. So yeah, make sure you protect your hands, by the way. Get yourself some cut-proof gloves. Check these out if you like. I sell them. I'll leave the link in the description below. But all in all,
all not a difficult job, just yeah, look, it's one of those fiddly ones, right? So give yourself plenty of time, take it slowly. You know, I went ahead and torqued everything down. The torque settings aren't very high, so you could use a ratchet gun, set it really high, and you'll probably be okay. But yeah, if you want to torque settings, I've included those as well. So yeah, all in all, this was a DIY video on how to replace both your engine mounts and your transmission mount on a BA or a BF Falcon. Comment below, let me know if the FGs are different or they're the same. I know that the AUs are pretty much the same. So yeah, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, hit that like button, hit subscribe. It really does help me out, and bye.